Off, but actually we start now with the safety briefing, real quick, nothing special, so we accomplish the liability. So there's no emergency drill today. So if there is an alarm off, please go to any exit the nearest to you. There's one here.
Let's do like the airplane.
Exactly. There's two there on the back, and there is one here. And if you have any doubts, so just go away from the building and you're going to be fine. And right behind the seats here at the lobby, there's two bathrooms, a male and female, or whatever choice you have. And the volunteers will help you out if you have any question, okay? So let's start with our program today. Good morning again, everyone. I'm Rosangela Berwick, and
I'm Antonio Bornel.
And in the name of the United States Spiritist Federation and all collaborators, Spiritist centers in Houston and all over the country, we would like to welcome you all to the 16th Spiritist Symposium.
As many of you know, this is our national annual event, which takes place in a different city and state every year. We are thrilled to host our event here in Houston, also known as Space City. And you know why? Because NASA is based here in this beautiful auditorium of Rice University.
The Spiritist Symposium is the single most relevant event, Spiritist event nationally, and where the majority of Spiritist centers and affiliated members join together to share experiences. This year, 45 Spiritist organizations across the U.S. have sponsored this event, and we would like to thank the organizing members of the United States Spiritist Federation, as well as all the local volunteers from Houston and other major cities in Texas and many different cities in the States in the U.S.
Well, let's welcome those from many different states who came a long way to share this day with us today, facing flight delays, trouble in the road, a lot of rain. It's such a pleasure to be together in person again, and still very thankful for these past 2 years that we have continued hosting the symposium virtually. Thank you to everyone who kept this event going during the pandemic. And welcome those who are watching our symposium live via the USSF YouTube channel and listening to it via the Spiritist radio. Keep tuned.
Please make sure to silence again your cell phones. And at this time, I'll invite Fernanda Vanskoski, a member of the Kardec Spiritist Society of Houston, to say the initial prayer so we can start our day connected with the high spirits.
Already feeling involved by this ambience that has been prepared for us by the mentors of this work, we connect to our Creator. Dear Father, we thank you for this opportunity to be here today on this beautiful day. We have our hearts and minds widely open to receive your teachings. In reflecting on them, we will leave this place today feeling stronger, more determined, more inspired to face our moments of uncertainty, not seeing them as problems, but as opportunity to grow. Help us to take every opportunity to practice them in our daily lives. Through actions of love, spreading hope, being your messengers. Father, bless all the ones who helped make possible this event, all the organizers, volunteers, all involved, giving their time, sharing their homes, their time, their love, going an extra mile for this event. Bless them, Father. Father, inspire the speakers today so the message will be delivered according to your will. Father, protect our event so it will happen peacefully. Father, give strength to the ones who work on the dissemination of Spiritism in this country. Shine your light on all of us and teach us to love all today and always. So be it.
Thank you, Fernanda. Before we start our day of learning, let's take care of critical yet important reminders. During all day today, while you're in this auditorium, sharing a lot of learning, kids and teens will be at their own classrooms, having a full day of activities. For those who drop off their kids, make sure you fill out all the required paperwork. Otherwise, please go back to the youth classroom and take care of this now. It is very important.
All the local groups of Texas that work together with the United States Spiritist Federation to make this event possible have their representatives here today. If you would like more information about these Spiritist centers, please contact the volunteers at Welcome Desk and ask of information about it. All these centers have been spreading the Spiritist teachings through different events such as talks, seminars, local and out-of-town speakers, and social media. And today they are welcoming all of you.
During the day, we'll have the opportunity of mingling with them, making new friends, enjoying some good coffee or tea, buying great Spiritist books, and asking questions about Spiritism. And if you feel the need for a private fraternal conversation, you can schedule it at the welcome desk. There are some times available for this conversation to happen today at the symposium on a first come, first served basis.
And before we start our program, it is important to point out that on an important day that we celebrate the USSF 25th anniversary, you have the opportunity to purchase great Spiritist books with the 25% off. It's not by chance. And if you haven't already taken a look at the different book stations in the auditorium lobby, do so during the breaks. Don't miss the different titles for children and for adults. There are new releases, including the book Initiation into Spiritism by Terezinha de Oliveira, which was the reference for a complete virtual course organized by the Federation. And it is available for everyone to watch anytime on YouTube channel.
Remember, if you have any questions about the subjects exposed here throughout the day, feel free to write them down. For those watching the symposium from home, you can send your comments or questions via chat. We might not be able to answer all your comments or questions today, but you do it in a proper time. If you wish, have your name and email address sent to us. You present here, you find a notepad and a pen in your tote bags, and you can write your questions and leave it at the front desk so it can be addressed properly.
And now to our program. It is about time for us to work on knowing ourselves and applying the knowledge we have been learning throughout these years to follow the planetary transition and go up a step. This is not an expectation for huge, fantastic acts all at once, but the little acts of kindness and the little efforts to self-betterment and the improvement of our surroundings. Every little thing matters. Let's analyze what these changes are in ourselves and what it is to become an integral human being. Let's remind ourselves of the losses we've had these past years and as a society and as individuals, and together find the strength and guidance to renew ourselves. It is time for renewal. The time is now of healing ourselves and continuing our personal growth. These are topics that we'll be discussing over the talks and roundtables today.
And talking about integral human being, What are the steps to becoming one? What does it really mean? It's time to begin our journey, no matter how steep it might seem. And for that talk, step by step, overcoming our own selves, we'd like to introduce our first speaker, Jussara Korngold. Jussara is currently the General Secretary of the International Spiritist Council and the Vice President of the United States Spiritist Federation. She is the founder and president of the Spiritist Group in New York and the Spiritist Alliance for Books. Mrs. Korngold is fluent in Portuguese, French, Spanish, and English. Only that? I'm surprised. So. And she's an international speaker, a published author, and a translator. Ms. Korngold works for the Brazil Child Health as its main executive, and she's also an executive board member of the group Mulheres do Brasil in New York. Let's welcome Jussara Korngold.
So good morning, everyone. My heart is beating fast, I have to tell you, not just because, it's been a while since we have been able to really share our thoughts in public, but mainly because we feel so grateful at this moment. It's been 3 years since many of us have seen each other and being together in a Spiritist event like the one we do, the Symposium in the United States of America. So we can only imagine the spirits that are here today celebrating with us our gathering. We are talking about a time of renewal, regrowth, and healing. And as opposed to what many of us may think, renewal, growth, regrowth, or healing has nothing to do with idleness, has nothing to do with us putting aside the hard work we have to do in order to accomplish our spiritual progress. We understand quite well how hard it is for us. It's still very low in the steps towards perfection. But we also understand the power that we all have of going baby steps in order to accomplish our spiritual evolvement, to be able to meet God and to feel God in our hearts, in our lives. And it is with this thought that we would like to share with you today one of the stories that the Spirit, Brother X, Humberto de Campos, brings for us to reflect, to analyze together. We would like to invite everyone to imagine yourselves having this conversation with Jesus. Because in the story that Humberto de Campos tells us from the book Luz Acima, Light Above, Light Ahead, Light Up, we have the disciple Philip coming to him, what Humberto de Campos called an old fisherman. When I read that, I said, old? How old was Philip? because we know that average, it was something between 20, 30 years of age, each of the disciples. So I was intrigued because I didn't remember by heart how old could Philip be. And of course, we don't have the exact date, but he was about 34. So Humberto de Campos said, the old. It was not because he was with Jesus for so long. It was because, well, 34 years old at that time was old. So Philip was always like all the disciples, meditating, trying to drink from the source of life that Jesus represented. And he was thinking to himself, it is so beautiful what Jesus is bringing to us. So powerful. But at the same time, it seems so out of reach. Sure, there is a divine mountain, high. Sure, there is this path that we can go and march towards happiness, liberation, peace, and meet God. But how could we, human beings, do that? And he thought, even ourselves, the direct disciples, the ones that were really immersed in the day-to-day life of Jesus, it seemed too far away. So he would imagine and he would see all the obstacles, how hard it would be for him, but also relating to his brothers and sisters to be able to truly live the ideals, to be filled with hope, and to overcome the hurdles of the way. So he would meditate about that quite often. And of course, because he shared the days with Jesus, he would now and then have the opportunity to talk to Jesus himself. And so he goes to Jesus and says, I know, I understand all of this, but it is so hard. How can our brothers and sisters do the same? It's when Jesus replies to Philip saying, Philip, and I don't know about yourselves, but I can really depict the image of Jesus like he was talking to us right now. My brothers and sisters, why do you think it's so hard? Why do you think it's so far beyond? And why do you think we should diminish the light of truth, the love of God, the teachings that we all need to have in order to accommodate what you would think is the level of human beings? So it is indispensable for us to show the summits of the divine revelation. This is the only way we can inspire the travelers of the journey to move on, to feel within themselves the desire to go through this way as well. So, continuing, he looks at Philip and says, do not underestimate the clarity that shines further. But Philip, very much like ourselves, when we are talking to someone that we understand having more knowledge than we do, in a certain subject, we still need to give our opinion. We still need to verbalize our thoughts, and we still need somehow to offer an alternative. So Philip, very much like ourselves, did the same. He goes to Jesus and say, okay, Jesus. Of course, coming from himself, coming from his thoughts, coming from the idea of helping him in this journey, but also his brothers and sisters, he says, but maybe, as a suggestion, what about, I'm using my own vocabulary here, allow me to do that. What about, graduating the vision a little bit? Don't show all the light. Look, the majority of us are going through this narrow way of thinking, incomprehension, causing harm to each other. So maybe if we dim the light a little bit of the revelation, they are not going to be blinded. And after all, there will be continuators of our work that can complete the work later on. And sometimes this is what we think. I hear quite so often in many places when we say, the children are the future. They are going to be the one that are going to bring all the revelation of the spirits, etc. But if we don't pave the way, if we don't do what we have to do, they will not be able to do that. And here is what Philip is telling Jesus. Maybe we just, show the one-on-one step, and then the other ones will bring more. So we can only imagine this conversation and how Jesus would relate with such loving attitude towards the disciples. And he says, Philip, it is not the crown of the mountain that disturbs the plain. Let us also remember that our brothers and sisters have much more possibilities within themselves that we imagine. So do not curse the light, because every impediment for us to march forward will be found more in ourselves than in the light that we are revealing. And Philip just replies to Jesus, Jesus, how I wish to understand this clearly. How I wish to understand this clearly. When we come to a gathering such as this one, and we are all here with the purpose of talking about our own spiritual evolvement, of sharing our experiences, of enlightening each other in relation to what we are doing that could be a path, a journey to us, the step by step. We wish there could be a shortcut. There is. And the shortcut is a very, very small word that I imagine all of you already know. It's Jesus. Jesus is the shortcut for us. It's just a matter of us stopping and analyzing the teachings beyond the idea that we have bringing from several past incarnations of dogmas of religion versus religiosity or spirituality. And after that, after this dialogue, few days after, Jesus, the greatest educator that we already have in this earth, come to Philip and says, Philip, I want you to take a journey with me. And the old Philip was ready for the journey. I mean, we can only imagine what a privilege it would be to go and, in one of those walks with Jesus. And little did he know that when Jesus asked him to march with him, to go in this journey with him, he would take Philip to climb Mount Hermon, the highest mountain in this entire Israel and the Mediterranean area. I can only imagine Philip arriving there and, right? But he was very happy to have this time with just himself with Jesus, and it was ready for the journey. And as soon as they started climbing this more than 9,000 feet mountain, he was looking with admiration the whole area that surrounded the mountain. The green, the trees, the plants, the animals, everything. But they started climbing, and climbing slowly. As they were moving up, every now and then, Philip would ask Jesus to stop, to have a little break. Because now the landscape was parched, was bare, and there were so many pebbles on the way. So he had to sit down, remove his sandals, each of the little pebbles that were between his toes, each time doing the same thing, and Jesus calmly sitting with him, watching him doing all that ritual of removing the sandals, removing the pebbles, looking between the toes, tending to the scars that already were forming because of the constant pain that represented, with a lot of patience, with a lot of care. So finally they reached the mountain top. And there, when they were there at the mountain top, and Philip could look at the whole area from the highest point, could feel the sun bathing him, the breeze that we can have in the higher mountains. And he was overtaken by that beauty that represented that journey and represented God's creation. Then comes the comment from the educator. Jesus looks at Philip and says, Philip, we took this journey. It was a steep mountain that we had to climb. And now we are here enjoying all that we can gather from our journey and this point we have. But let me tell you something. It was not the brightness from above that obstructed our march, but the trivial pebble on the ground. The bright day never hurt. This is the man that one day said, "Do not hide the light under the bushel." So here, when Philip, naive, thinking that somehow we should graduate the revelation, we should graduate to our brothers and sisters, to our friends that sometimes come to us and say, how come you can cope with everything that is happening in your life? And truth be said, everyone is going through tremendous ordeal. It is because we know the light. We know where we are going to. Jesus tell him, pay attention, Philip, because it was not the light, it's the little matters of the world that interrupt humans' journey to God, our Father. I think about my own experience, the experiences of some of you that I know here. And we know for sure how much we are doing this effort. We see many times one or the other is stopping their march because there are so many pebbles in their sandals. And when this happens, like Jesus says here in this message, and I really invite everyone to read the message, and because we can only gather so much when we try to bring, some understanding about those profound messages that we receive from those spirits. It's when we need each other, because our feet is bleeding. But our wish to continue, it is still the same. And maybe I will need some of you to donate your sandals so I can continue the march. Or we can switch. Yours is better than mine. You walk a mile with mine, and then I walk a mile, and we keep on sharing. There is no other way for us to continue considering where we are in relation to this mountain. It's only through cooperation. But sometimes we do the opposite, and it's when Jesus goes to Philip and says to him, observe the minute conversation, the erroneous opinion, the thoughtless gesture, they can become poisoned little stones that cut the feet. So not only sometimes we do not help, but we aggravate, we become the pebbles on the journey of those brothers and sisters. In a time that we need stability, in a time that we need the support of each other. It doesn't matter how many we are. It doesn't matter if our voices are going to reach each and every home. As long as it reaches, it goes through those that are in need. That somehow we can become the continuators, like Philip said. There will be continuators. We have been invited to be the continuators, but not by hiding the light. It's no longer time for us to do what we used to do in the past, when understanding knowledge of divine nature were just but for a few privileged ones, the initiates in the ancient Egypt, or even not so long ago that we would not even have the teachings of Jesus for 15th century, unless it was in Latin, of course, the Greek and Aramaic that we had before, but not in our own languages. How could we learn? How could we have this contact with God ourselves? And it is the same Philip that then at the mountaintop, having this conversation with with Jesus, that looks at Jesus and says, "Yes, Master, now I understand." This is what we need to do. We need to understand. We need to understand that will take time, that it will be hard. At the beginning, we arrive full of enthusiasm for the work, for the dissemination, for the transformation. But then, like some people say, life happens. Well, this is when we need more this understanding. But it is the same Philip that when Jesus was having the Last Supper, he came to Jesus and said, "Oh, Jesus, how I wish to be able to see the face of God." Jesus looks at him and says, "Philip, Philip, have you not understood yet that when you look at me, you are seeing the face of God?" Jesus, the path to truth and life, never claiming to be God, but being the representative of God. The teachings, the living teachings of the natural laws, divine laws reflected in Jesus' actions. And with all of this emotion, being able to absorb the energies, the embrace that the good spirits of this land are giving us, connecting with our benefactors, the disseminators of the light, that at this moment also show the same gratitude that is within our hearts, because they know of our efforts. They know what each one of us are doing to contribute for the journey of our brothers and sisters and ours to become lighter. So we thank all of them, all of you that are here today, that are following us at home, that are willing to continue in this march. Let us keep on looking at the joy that awaits us, at the liberation that awaits us, but that we can feel in our today with the little things that we are doing to see the face of God in Jesus and Jesus' teachings. May you all be blessed. May this symposium be a very special one for all of us. One thing for us to remember, especially in this celebration, 25 years, with so many of us here present, others that have departed already, but sure are here with us, and all of those that are accompanying us from their home. May God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jussara. It is great to know that as immortal spirits who reincarnate in physical bodies in order to evolve, we have both rights and responsibilities with our own choices. To explore this idea, let's welcome our next speaker, Dan Assisi, for his talk entitled Living Well in the Present to Shape a Better Future. Dan Assisi is an award-winning author and international speaker he has delivered hundreds of talks and conferences on spirituality in over 60 cities on 4 continents. Known for a mix of deep thinking and witty humor, Dan takes a unique approach to spirituality that is steeped in reason to remind audiences everywhere of our spiritual nature. Dr. Assisi is a founding member of the Spiritist Institute and the California Spiritist Association. You can also find him as the host of the Spiritist Conversations podcast. And Daniel holds a doctorate in education and a master's in public administration with a graduate certificate in public policy. Welcome, Dan.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you in person again after a couple of years. Because you see, I found out late in my life that Spiritism had given me a second unexpected gift. The first one was the knowledge that's transformative and helps me see things differently. But the second one that I wasn't expecting are all the friendships and the people that I have got to meet along the way that I would not have otherwise met were it not for Spiritism. So thank you. Thank you for being here. It's good to see old faces, meet new ones. Not that you're old, but you know what I mean. And it's been a long journey. It's been a complex couple of years, has it not? We have dealt with a pandemic that has changed the way we work and live our lives. We have also been faced with social injustice and the clarity that the world is not as fair and kind to everybody as we would like it to be. And it has become apparent in these past years that we have a lot to do on that front to make sure that how we look like, who we love, where we're born, do not set us as second-class citizens. We have also been faced with war as we speak. We have war breaking out in Ukraine and other places as well. And it has been hard. It has been hard because we're also now staring at this idea of economic uncertainty and how our economy and our lives will look like. And all of these things have taken us off balance. They have created all this anxiety and stress in us, and it's no surprise that we are grappling with mental health. We have homelessness. We have the prospect of suicide looming over us every single day in so many great numbers. It does seem, when we look at all these things up close, that life has not been kind to us, that the world has not been kind to us. And that's understandable. However, there's got to be more to this, and there is. And that's what today we want to find ways of living better now so that we can help shape a more fulfilling future for all of us. And I am absolutely convinced that Spiritism can help us in this path, can help us think differently and look up from what we see in the world and see that indeed there's more than meets the eyes. And so to that, I invite you to think slightly different right now and try a little exercise with me. What do you see here? What is this? Trees. What else? Fabric. Sunflowers. Dots. I have heard people call this chaos. I have even had a friend tell me that was the COVID virus. Whatever you see here is what you see here. But what is this, Dan? Well, what if I were to tell you that this is a small patch from a wonderful picture, a painting actually, by the French painter Jussara, which is called A Sunday Afternoon in the Island of La Grande Jetée. And in this incredible picture, we see that tiny little patch there that I showed you, it's but a piece of the dress of the woman on the right side. And what I find fascinating by this wonderful picture, which is a huge canvas, basically the size of what you're looking at here in the screen if you're present with us, it's about 7 to 10 feet, it's a big one, is that it's a marvelous new way of thinking about art. Jussara was one of the beginners of what they call pointillism. It's a movement of painting by points. And if you look carefully, the entire picture is painted by little dots. And I think that's incredible. It happened, curiously, at the same time that Kardec was around, Spiritism was coming about. But it's a different way of looking at the world that has also been really advanced and foreshadowed what is to come, because our monitors today, our TVs, work in the same fashion. The images are composed by little dots of color. So by doing this here, he paints a picture, and you can see that there's a lot going on in this canvas. We have a very respectful couple with an umbrella and a top hat up front. We have people sunbathing on the left. There's even a man there showing his shoulders. Ooh, quite risque, maybe for the 1880s. right? We have a boat sailing in the background. We have dogs and cats moving around. We have a whole picture and stories and lives that are pictured in this incredible work. But you don't get to see that unless you take a couple of steps back from the canvas. Because if your nose is too close to the canvas, all you will see are the dots. And while they're beautiful in themselves, and you can appreciate the detail and the technicality, you must take a step back to see the big picture. Can you tell where I'm going? And that is why it is a fascinating opportunity for us today to take some time to think about Spiritism and how it can help us live a better life. Because you see, Spiritism is a way of looking at the world, is a lens that helps us think not only materialistically, but spiritually as well. When we put our Spiritist glasses on, what we are really doing is seeing things from a higher vantage point. And once we do that, the things we look at transform themselves. Once we take that step back from everyday life, we understand our spiritual nature. And in so doing, we transform ourselves and the approach to the world. And that's why today, I don't want to talk of Spiritism. I want to carve some minutes to talk about Spiritism, to zoom out together, to see the benefits that Spiritism and the knowledge that it shines a light on can help us at everyday living, and how we can perhaps talk about shaping our future. It may be nothing new to you, but come on this journey with me anyways, because it's important for us to remember the beauty of these teachings and what they can symbolize and promise us. And the first idea that I want to visit with you is that the world will get better. Even in the middle of all chaos, we have learned through 107 years of Spiritist research, mediumship, communication with the spiritual world, that everything is constantly evolving. I'm evolving, you're evolving. Everything in this world is constantly getting better. We have learned of reincarnation. We have learned of spiritual progression. We have been told that everything from the most simple atom to the most beautiful spirit, which once was an atom, is constantly evolving. If that is the case, tomorrow will be a better day than it is today. The world is getting better. But then, that sounds contradictory to all those things that are happening. How can that be? Well, I propose to you that we are noticing things better now because we are growing, and the things that are not right are more obvious to us now than they were before, and that's why they bother us more. That is a good thing. The world is getting better. We are getting better. There's reason to be optimistic about what tomorrow will bring, even in the midst of everything else in the world that's happening right now. But sometimes we pay attention only to that which is not right. And we also need to be reminded there is a lot of goodness in this world. The good spirits even get a chance to tell us that the reason why sometimes we don't see the good in the world is because goodness is shy. What we see is crisis and attention-seeking behavior. But we don't see that there's a lot of greatness happening right now. Never in the history of humanity have we had so many people dedicating their time, volunteering their money to causes, whatever causes they believe in. There has never been so many nonprofits, so many hours at work in our history as a collective. That is reassuring. That ought to uplift us. And we have to understand that all we need to do to see that is take a step back from our world, from the news that focuses on that which is loud and obnoxious, to notice the kindness and the underlying tone of beauty that permeates everything in the creation. There is goodness in the world. Look around. This is a perfect example. We're gathered here today with lots of volunteers who receive absolutely $0 for the work they do to put this together. It is a miracle in a world that tells us that everything that we do should have material or financial gain attached to it. We're like little salmons running upstream, saying that great things can come from people who dedicate their time to something they believe in. Spiritist groups are the same. They're little islands of beauty in the middle of a chaotic world. There is goodness in the world. But before I bore you to death, let's move on. There's more. There's more that we learn in Spiritism once we put our Spiritist goggles in that can help us see life differently. And another one is the certainty that you were prepared for this. You were prepared for this moment in time, to all the chaos in the world, because guess what? You have survived 100% of your bad days. How do I know that? Because we have lived many lives. And let me tell you a secret. Since we have learned about reincarnation, we have to come to realize that even the thing that has scared us the most through the pandemic and mainly during our own lives, death, it's something that we have already conquered. I don't want to be rude, but I'm going to break it to you. You are pro a dying. You have died tens, hundreds, who knows how many times before. The worst thing that can happen is not us dying. It is not living. Because we have done that before. And now it's time to change. You are prepared for this. Every incarnation you have ever had has led you to this moment. You were placed here and you asked perhaps sometimes to be here to make a contribution to the world. Another way of putting this, perhaps not as eloquent, is spiritually speaking, when you put your Spiritist lens on, you're spiritually bulletproof. There's nothing you can do that will stop you from existing. But once we are too close to the canvas, we think we can. Once we're too close to everyday life, we don't realize that. But when we take a step back to see the big picture, we see love, and we see that God will have never placed you in a position in which you are not going to succeed. Because God, by definition, has to be kind and loving. If you are presented with a problem that is beyond your ability to meet that problem, it's unfair. And if it's unfair, then God would be unfair. And God, by definition, cannot be unfair. So what it means is we've got to flip that around and see that every problem that comes to us, it's actually spiritual compliment. It's spirituality saying, congratulations, you can solve this. You are now capable to handle this challenge. Not exactly how we think every day, right? That's why we have to take a step back, because you have to be sure that whatever it is that you're going through your life, family, relationship, challenges, you can figure it out and you will. Now, it might not have the answer that you want at the time that you would like, but there will be an answer in a time and a place, and you are going to be okay, spiritually speaking. And you will grow. And that's something that when we are too close to our studies, to our lives, to our paying our mortgage, our bills, we forget. And we got to reassure ourselves and go back to that which we know. And what else? There is more good news. You have come to blossom, not to suffer. You were made to be happy. This creator that we are talking about, that is kind and love, has made you and has forced you to just do one thing in your entire spiritual existence. There's the one thing that you have no choice of. Everything else you have a choice of. And that one choice that you do not have is that eventually you will be perfect and happy. So we need to shed these things that we have been bringing with us from our past lives, where we think that life is suffering. Life is not suffering. Life is learning. Life is thriving. Life is blossoming. Yes, there is pain in the world. I mean, have you seen a man with a cold? It's the worst pain in the universe, right? But the point is, pain will be there, but what we make of it, the suffering, varies. There are people that go through life with a lot of pain and little suffering. And there are people, on the other hand, that go through life with a little pain and a lot of suffering. So can we shed that aside and tap into the beauty that it is to be alive and to be able to grow and learn? And that means making mistakes. That means accepting us who we are, because we are in constant evolution, we have learned. So, don't come to think that you have come to suffer. That is not what you're here for. Our older brother Jesus says, happiness is not of this world because it is spiritual in nature. But he did not say happiness cannot be in this world. As a matter of fact, when we do that prayer, our Lord, we're in heaven, so forth. At one point we get and we say, may heaven come to earth. Who is going to make that happen, people? Who is on earth right now? It's us. So we're the ones that are going to do that. So it's important for us to realize that happiness will come, but it will require effort. And that leads us to our next point, which is also important for us to talk about this. We're not on vacation. Life is not a wonderful beach seat with a pink drink and an umbrella on it. That's not what we're here for. When we look at it spiritually speaking, one incarnation is like a day at work. We come, we work hard, we go back, we rest, we reconsider things, and we come down again to work. It doesn't mean that you can't have a vacation. Be mindful. Go explore Houston, see things, do all that. But let's be honest that we are not here on vacation. We have been born in this time and in place to work on ourselves and contribute to the world around us. We have come to work. It's important that we remember that. That means we should expect to bump into challenges, into solutions. But again, we know that these challenges will make you grow, and that these challenges are not beyond your abilities, and that you can tap into many different people. And that is important for us to remember, because we forget when we are too close to the canvas. We forget. Our job is remembering. But there's good news. We're never alone. And I don't mean in the shower, people. We have also learned that life goes on, and that our family, spiritual family, is greater than you imagine. We have gone through difficult times, and it's possible we may go through difficult times again. And in that time, we may so-called lose people that we care about. But do you stop loving the people who pass away? No. If life goes on, and it does, do you think that they stop loving you? Why do we forget that? Whatever they are, those who are dear to us and who are not physically present here continue to love us. That we have learned through mediumship. Some of us who can see and hear them cannot doubt that fact. And neither can we, because We read books by the spirits. We listen to their messages. We understand what they're trying to tell us. We are never alone. But you know what's even more beautiful when we begin to put our Spiritist glasses on? We are reminded that we have also lived many times before. And so it's time to do some basic spiritual math, people. Don't need to break out the calculator. It's going to be simple. Don't worry. But what are we going to say here is that if you have had many lives before, let's pretend, I don't know how many lives you had or I had, but let's pretend we had 50. And in this 50, we had more than that. Let me break it out to you, right? In this 50 lives, you had different fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, partners, colleagues, children, friends, dogs, cats, horses, neighbors. And in every life we come, we don't bring the same entourage all the time. So we have made 50 different groups of friends that we do not recall and whom we have lived closely and loved, and they have loved us. And again, they have not stopped loving us. That means that you have thousands of people that you have spiritually come in contact with through many lifetimes, if you're considering just 50, but we have more, who love you deeply and care about you. And even if you're not aware of them right now, they are still loving you. Can you understand the impact of that love and acceptance can have in your lives? If we stop to take a step back and let it in. That is why I think our spiritual friends talk about the spiritual family. And sometimes we think it's just, oh, it's my mentor, it's my guide, it's my grandma, it's beyond that. The numbers are far greater than this auditorium, cheering and rooting for you during all times. Just because you don't remember doesn't mean they're not there. You know what's even more beautiful when I start to think about Spiritism and this idea that we constantly progress? Is that I will reincarnate again. And every time you do, and I do, we will make new friends and we will add them to our families. And that love, that spiritual family will grow. And if that is not enough, remember that they too have friends who like them and by proxy will like you because they like them. So that's why we didn't break out the calculator, because we can't possibly calculate how many wonderful souls, how many love and support comes our way if only we put a Spiritist lens on and take a step back. And that's important. Because once we realize that we are immortal spirits, traveling through space and time, growing, building relationships, and learning, everything changes. If only we can bring that knowledge to our daily lives. I sometimes joke that I spend more time every day brushing my teeth, twice a day for 2 minutes for the dentists out there, than I spend thinking about myself as an immortal spirit. We've got to change that somehow. We've got to make time for this. We've got to go back to this beautiful, beautiful advice we received from the Spirit of Truth in this wonderful book of light called The Gospels Explained by Spiritism, when it says, Spiritist, love. That is the first teaching. Bring love to everything we do. The second one is learn. Love and learn. That is a good recipe for success. That is a good recipe for living right now. And the future? Well, if we are living the present with that awareness that Spiritism can bring us, if we are taking that step to step back and understand that we are prepared for this, our entire spiritual lives we're prepared for this, that we are never alone, that we are spiritually indestructible, and that we have the capacity to overcome everything that's in front of us, then we know that the future has to be bright. and that we are in control because there is such a thing as free will. So the future is in our hands. It depends on us, not on anybody else. We just have to go back to that which we know and think differently. Take a step back from the canvas and answer this incredible invitation that lingers with time. You see, I have placed here a picture of our older brother Jesus, as I call him, sometimes JC. And it's a different picture than traditionally we have seen in history. And that is meant to provoke some thoughts. This is a picture painted by a painter, Akini, which is more historically close to what the historical Jesus could have looked like. So that we can break away from that which we have heard before about this incredible spirit and reevaluate, because what he looks like is not important. But what he has come to show us, not tell us, but show us is, you see, when we take that step back from the canvas, I stop seeing a message of pain and suffering at the cross, and I focus on the one incredible legacy that he has left us with, which is life after life. He came back to show us that there's far more than meets the eyes, that the world is not just physical in nature. So if we are going to live well, we have to accept this spiritual reality that he pointed us to and that we have been hearing for millennia from all different sages and for centuries, and now for only 170 years from Spiritism. Seems like a lot, 170 years, right? But when we take a step back, it's not. That's why sometimes it's hard for us to understand these things, because we haven't spent that much time, spiritually speaking, with these truths in our heart. So can we make space in our heart today to renew ourselves, not by doing something incredibly difficult or portentous, but by going back to that one piece of knowledge that we feel in our hearts at one point in time, we felt it, and that we know with our brains now, in part because of Spiritism, that we will outlive these challenges, that we will grow beyond what is right now, that we together will do wonderful things, that we are going to change this world and shape a better future, one day at a time, with our own lives. Not by doing something miraculous, by remembering who we are spiritually and that we are evolving, and remembering who is next to us, a spirit also evolving. And when we do that, when we give ourselves grace and we give others grace and feel these bonds of kinship, what could we possibly fear? So yes to a time of great tribulation and challenges, yes to real hardships out there, but yes to our ability to overcome all of this because there is a God. Yes to lending a helping hand to those around us. Yes to being more patient with our parents or our children or our loved ones. Yes to remembering who we are. And yes to celebrating our spiritual selves, living better now, because if we live better now, we automatically shape the future. So thank you for your time and your patience, and may you continue to grow, love, and learn.
Dan, thank you very much. You're such an engaged speaker and always bring unique perspectives about Spiritism for us. So thank you. And let's take your suggestion, and among this chaos, let's shape our future one day at a time. We are now ready for our roundtable, which will address issues that are very current and present in our lives. So many losses that are very current that we had to endure during these past few years. The whole world faced many challenges, and we are still facing some more. Spiritism comes with its power to console and enlighten us, so we can see difficult issues as a real spiritual blessing. The moderator of our roundtable entitled Coping with Losses will be João Korngold. Rosangela, back to you to introduce João.
João Korngold is one of the founders and directors of the Spiritist Group of New York and the Spiritist Alliance for Books. He began studying Spiritism more than 25 years ago and has been one of the directors of the mediumship meetings at the Spiritist Group of New York for the past 20 years. He's also responsible for study groups that focus on the basic books of Spiritism and the André Luiz collection. He gives talks on Spiritism in Portuguese and in English. João Korngold is an engineer and works as a banker. Welcome, João.
I always have to adjust the microphone to me, right? Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening for those that are not here but are in other places where it's afternoon or night, or they are going to watch us later. So we had two wonderful presentations here. My wonderful wife, Jussara, brought the idea of the pebble that we have to overcome, the pebbles and the obstacles in our lives. Dr. Dan Assisi brought us the idea of the bird's eye view that we need to take to not focus too much on the pebbles, but to focus on our journey towards enlightenment. So we are dealing with our daily pains, right? What we are struggling with in this past couple of years, as Dan mentioned in the beginning, with the pandemic, with the war, but most of all with losses, right? We all lost something along the way. So on this panel, we're going to bring 4 specialists that are going to go over different aspects of losses and how should we address them according to Spiritism. How can we gain strength and find the tools to overcome these challenges that are our daily losses brought by this difficult world we are living through. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'll invite them to join us here. First one is Suzana Simoes. Suzana Simoes is an active worker of the Spiritist movement. Dr. Simoes spends her time between her professional work as a doctor in physical therapy, her family, and the dissemination of Spiritism. Suzana has worked as a member of the Spiritist Federation of Florida and the United States Spiritist Federation. She's one of the founders of the Conscious Living Spiritist group in Miami, where she works primarily overseeing the work in English. She's an active speaker in the US and abroad. Thanks, Suzana. Welcome. Now, I would like to invite and introduce Lopes. Beatriz Lopes is a recent Stony Brook University graduate with a Bachelor of Science in Applied Mathematics and Statistics, as well as a minor in the Italian language. Bia started her career as a quantitative consultant and Mass Mutual, and has grown up in Spiritism, attending the Allan Kardec Spiritist Center of Danbury, Connecticut since the age of 3, and during college, she attended the Long Island Spiritist Center. She has been involved in Spiritism by participating in study groups, giving lectures, delivering a speech at the United Nations, and most recently helping to coordinate a youth Spiritist retreat. Welcome, Bia. Luiz Lima. Luiz Lima has begun his journey in Spiritism in 1990. As a serious researcher on the scientific aspect of Spiritism, Luiz has been facilitating the studies of how to bridge science and Spiritism in both languages, Portuguese and English. Mr. Lima is a renowned lecturer in the Spiritist movement and participates in local and national seminars and events all year round. Luiz Lima holds a degree in electronic engineering and he works in the computer network industry. Welcome, Luiz.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Rosana de Rosa has been living in Florida for 24 years. She graduated in psychology from Florida Atlantic University and has been actively working as a speaker as well as teaching classes at Spiritist centers in the US and Brazil. In 2018, she and 3 other friends founded the nonprofit organization, the Embracing Grief and Loss Project. This project has been raising awareness of the healing of the soul through the work of dedicated volunteers and is done virtually. It is present in more than 18 countries and in 16 states in Brazil. Welcome, Rosa. So, again, our panel talks about coping with losses. And what we are going to do is divide between some subjects and invite the speakers. We're going to start with Luiz Lima. He's going to talk a little bit to us on the impact of all sorts of losses in our lives. We know that some of us lost loved ones, others lost lifestyle, social interactions, we lost relationships. So, Luiz, what can you bring to us?
Well, nobody likes losses, of course. It's a hard thing. Our perspective within a lifetime, our perspective changes. When you are a kid, you see it one way. When you are older, it's another way. When you are much older, after 34, it's another way. So Spiritism brings us some very interesting insights. And I'm going to talk a little bit about losses and what Spiritism brings, how we can see it differently. In 2017, Hollywood came with a very interesting picture, which was actually the make of a book 10 years before that, 2007. The movie is called, it was very acclaimed. The movie is called The Shack, and I'm sure most of you saw the movie. And it's a journey. The movie is basically inviting us for a personal journey on how do we see death, and how can we see death from that point on? Does it change your perspective? Yes or no? That's more or less what the movie is about. We're not going to talk really about the movie, but it's about rethinking death, bringing elements that shake our conviction that death is the end of everything. That's what the movie is all about. And of course, there's a lot of elements in the movie, but when I saw that, I said, well, that's really interesting because it aligns 100% with what Spiritism can bring us. For us, in general, for most of us, it makes us feel underpowered. How come that happened? No? I could not do anything. I was unable to stop that person from dying, that person from leaving, whatever it was. It makes us feel empowered. That's in general how we go about death. And that doesn't help us. That's what makes it more difficult, thinking that we are underpowered and we should have more power and dethrone God. I can't dethrone God. I can't do that. I cannot expect that one day we're gonna, let's say, language, beat death. We're not gonna be overthrowing God. So we have to see it in a different way. We cannot see from here, willing to make things happen up there. So, like I was saying, somebody dies, right? We still love him. So there's still things going on, and we don't seem to be that because we want the body of that person with us, living with us, or whoever it was. I want you to stop for a little bit, go back to the Spirit's book. In the Spirit's book, from question 100 through question 130, Allan Kardec brings us something that's called Spiritist hierarchy, also sometimes called Spirit scale. The purpose of this thing is to make it easier for us to understand that each one of us is at a different level. So this scale, you see from the bottom, the impure spirits, those are the spirits undergoing their first incarnations. Those are the ones that are not as well advanced as you go up on the scale. And on the top, you have pure spirits. So I put some color scheme here so you can feel the general difference. We're not going to talk about each one of them. That's not the point today. The point is understand losing loved ones, right? The red ones, the ones in the bottom of the scale, those are spirits. They are third order spirits, also called imperfect. There's a predominance of material life over spiritual life. That's us. We are red spirits. We are spirits living in a planet of trials and expiations because that's appropriate for those spirits. The green one, good spirits, that's exactly the other way around. The predominance is not material life over spiritual life. It's the other way around. The spiritual life over material life. And the pure spirits, like Jesus, they don't even have to incarnate anymore. They do as a mission when needed, when there's a reason for that. So when you look at this, right, instead of going to the full scale of 10 names, just go to the 3 orders. We are third order. Here's the conflict. We are living a material life more than a spiritual life. When somebody dies, a loved one dies, the physical part of that person is no longer here, but the spiritual part is. Love goes on. We still love the person. That's a tremendous conflict. Now I have what I had, if you will. That's a tremendous conflict. And why do we get into a conflict? Because we are third order spirits. We want the physical part. We want the body here, in the house that used to live, in the place they used to work, whatever it was. And that's where we don't have a good grasp of the meaning of this thing. Because we are still putting our efforts into material life. So we want the body back. And we are going to cry for days, weeks, months. We're going to cry out loud. We're going to revolt. We're going to rebel because we want the physical body back. It's not going to happen. And that's what Spiritism teaches us. Why do we want the body back? Because we are third order spirits. So, think about this. There is presence in every absence. The person is absent, but you're in conflict because it's not absent, it's present in your heart. The spiritual body of that person is still with you. It's still friends with you, it's still living that relationship spiritually, at a spiritual level. So there is presence in every absence. And Spiritism, in general, is very much that way. It's a complete twist of what we usually see. It makes us sit on the other side of the desk to see the conversation from the other point of view. Who is on the other side of the desk? The ones who left us already, the discarnates. So we look at the desk from this perspective, we see one thing. They look from this perspective, they see another thing, and they tell us, this is what I see. So what I see is the loved one still loves you. That's like Dan said, right? You still love them. Because there is presence in every absence. So what does Spiritism leave us? This is what I usually like to say. Instead of, for us, right, all of us, instead of living up for what we are, let's live up for what we can be. Living up for what I am, I'm going to suffer because I'm a third water spirit. Living up for what I can be, I'm going to be living as a green spirit, much better. Comfort in my heart, living that love, even though the physical part is no longer present. That's what Spiritism brings to us, to look at death, not as something that physically, there was a partition somewhere, there was a break point somewhere, because it's not. So we can live up for what we can be. It's a lot better. It brings a lot more happiness than living up for what we are, that we complain all the time.
Thank you, Luiz. Can we aim for the blue one also? No. Oh, that's hard. The green is closer, but we can aim for the blue one also, right? So now we're going to invite Bia Lopes. If we added 34, we are old. She's middle age now, right? So Bia is going to bring us a little bit of the youth view, right? Because some young people, they have lost milestones. They lost a lot of their firsts, right? First day of high school, special birthdays. We don't know what the impact is going to be on this youth generation on years to come. So Bia is going to address a little bit for us on this aspect of the youth. Thanks, Bia.
Yeah, thank you, Joao. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I am 23 years old, so I'm at that middle age. But what I want to bring here today is talking about loss, but from the aspect of youth. So as we know, as Luiz already pointed out, right, as we think about it from an adult's point of view, we know that adults have so much to lose, right? They lose family members, they lose relatives, loved ones, friends, coworkers, right? We have that physical loss. And they also have things to lose, to worry about, like their jobs, their cars, their houses, being able to provide for their family. So there's a lot of things that adults have that can be lost, right? And right, because we're in that third order, it does, stir that up for us. It does make us emotional, and we need to learn how to cope with that because we're not at that blue, we're not at that pure spirit level yet. But it's important to also take a moment to realize, how do losses affect youth, today's youth? And like Daniel mentioned, right, putting on the Spiritist glasses, right now let's put on the youth glasses to look at losses through the point of view of youth. How do youth see these losses? So youth also lose family members, right? They lose, especially during a time like COVID, we could see that they lose teachers, maybe even friends. So they have that loss of loved ones, but they also lose pets. They lose their favorite toy that they have had their whole life that they have not lived without yet. And also not just physical loss, but there's emotional losses, right? They lose friends that they were friends with. They lose their first love, their first crush. They lose a soccer game. They lose a science competition. These things are also losses that youth have to cope with all the time. And of course, during the time of the pandemic, we saw, as Joao mentioned a little bit, we saw other losses that you would have never imagined, right? The loss of first day of school, the loss of socializing with your peers in person, the loss of going to prom. A lot of people lost that, and you would never think that, but for a youth, right, that's something really important. And for some youth, like myself, you lost your college graduation. So youth lost a lot of things, and while these things might seem trivial, right? Like, okay, prom, okay, graduation, you still graduated. They might seem trivial and simple, but think about it. Again, put on those youth glasses and think about what that looks like to the youth. That's all they've known. That's all they've ever looked for, right? They were waiting for that moment and then they lost that. So those are also big losses to consider in the aspect of youth lives. So when we think of youth, we might think of, young children. We might think of elementary school. But it's also, and we do want to address that as well, but it's also important to think of that time of adolescence, because adolescents are trying to be independent. They're trying to do their own thing. They don't want adult support, but at the same time, they need that adult support. So take a second to just think, what age do you think adolescence ends? Yeah, so some people, right, might think, okay, 18, you graduate high school, you're 18, now you can do some things legally, you can live on your own, okay, 18. Some people think, okay, 18, you're still a teen, maybe it's 20. Maybe it's 21, right, when you're finally legal. But scientifically, in science research, that period of rapid brain development and learning that is considered as adolescence actually goes until age 25. So it's not, right, as much as we think of youth, we think of young children, adolescents in their late teens and their early 20s are also in that period of rapid growth and development that they need support and they need to learn to navigate the world that they're in. In the Spirits book, there's a chapter, Return to the Physical Life, and there's a section on infancy. And one question, and I'm going to read it here to not misquote, but question 383 asks, what is the point of a spirit experiencing childhood? Right? Why? Why is the point of us coming as a child, of us having to have that childhood, of that period of development for 25 years? What is the point of that? And the answer here is, the Spirit's answer. The purpose of incarnation is the improvement of the spirit. And childhood makes a spirit more open to the impressions it receives. This may contribute to its advancement, towards which all those responsible for the child's education and training must contribute. So we have this phase of childhood because we're naturally open to things. We're naturally learning and soaking in all the information around us. That's the point, because as a spirit, right, the purpose of incarnation, like it's saying here, is to improve. So as a child, if we're open to accepting new ideas, if we're soaking everything in, that makes it easier for us to improve. And I do want to note here that it's all those responsible for the child's education. We'll get into that a little bit later. And in question 385, a few questions later, a part of the answer says, the weakness of youth renders them more flexible and more open to advice. So because youth are in this period of vulnerability, they are open to receiving this advice. And that's why this stage is so important. And it's important to remember that while they're open to receiving this good advice, they can also take in negative experiences as well, like coping with loss. So it's important that we guide youth in this time so that they know how to better cope. And just a quick example here. I have a really close friend that when he was little, he was very, very close to his grandfather, right? He idolized his grandfather. Then one day, his grandfather got sick and was in the hospital. And they told him, all the adults in his life said, pray for your grandfather. So he prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed, but the grandfather still passed away. And so how did that affect him in his life? He said, oh, well, God didn't listen to me, God doesn't care, or God doesn't exist. And I wish, right, that there was a happy ending to that story, but it's till this day, he has a really hard time accepting God because of that moment that happened in his childhood. So these moments that might seem like everyone was coping through that loss, the youth needs that guidance so that they can redirect those thoughts. It's not that they're not going to be sad, but to redirect those thoughts because those negative impacts in our lives also will carry with us. And so I have a few suggestions here. Obviously, there's tons of things we can do to support youth. But what's important is that youth do have supportive adults in their lives. And again, these aren't just parents. These are mentors, teachers in the Spirit Center or at school, guidance counselors, coaches for sports, directors, anyone that this person is in contact with. All people that youth comes in contact has an impact in their development, right? Again, that youth is soaking in all of that information. So everyone around that youth is someone that the youth is looking into. They're looking, oh, what is that person doing? Oh, should I do that too? Maybe I'm going to do that. So they're soaking it all in. So if there's a bad example, they might soak that in. If there's a good example, they'll soak that in. So it's really important that all of those, not just parents, are responsible for this development of the youth so that they grow and they develop these positive mentalities, these positive traits that will help them when coping with loss. And so before, the youth is even in a situation where they're coping, where they have to cope with loss, adults can take proactive steps. So youth having care, affection, validation, even just laughing with an adult has scientifically been proven to be directly linked to the part of the brain that develops in regulating our emotions. So having that positive connection beforehand is going to play a role in eventually, when the youth does have to go through struggles, to be able to better cope with that. And when the youth is coping with a loss, right, there's some things we can do. We can talk to the youth. Really listening to them goes such a long way when they really think they're being listened to, that you're validating their feelings. Don't just shut down what they're saying. Validate what they're feeling. Redirect them, as needed. Help them navigate their emotions, but don't shut them down. Really listen to them. And the last thing that I want to bring here is providing access to supportive resources. So while adults, they're not expected to know everything. And we know that we're still in that third order, so we don't know everything. But what we do know is how to find other resources. We know how to find other people that might know the answer. We know how to find books that know the answer. We know how to find Spiritism, All of us in this room have found Spiritism. So adults play a really important role in bridging that gap for youth, Finding the youth is going through something, bridge that gap. Find the resources for the youth, provide them. It doesn't mean that they have to accept all the resources, but provide those resources, such as Spiritism. And providing that to the life of the youth can really make a difference when they're coping with these losses. And some of our other panelists here are going to talk more about how Spiritism specifically can help us cope. So that's where I'll leave us off today.
Thanks, Bia. And a reminder for all of us, we are going to be young again in the next incarnation. So take advantage of the learnings, right? And many more other incarnations. Thanks, Bia. So now I would like to invite Rosana. Rosana de Rosa is going to talk about how to cope with loss and death, right? That's a very important subject, and very important that we prepare ourselves. Suzana.
It's true. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's not working on the microphone.
How about now?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today. I think it's a very important topic to think about, and how we cope the loss and the death. I'd like to talking about a little bit how was my experience. I lived the enlightened experience of motherhood for two beautiful kids, and both died in the infancy. And those experiences in grief invite me to live Terry and live the practice what death, grief, loss, and life mean. when you have the experience, maybe everybody here had already, or maybe not, but if you already did, you know, it's a little upside down. You start to recreate what it means life, what it means that, like Bia said, when you have the experience, the friend told her, maybe you believe in God or not. And I think it's an incredible opportunity. Oh, thank you. It's not working well. I think it's incredible opportunity to us to use this moment like a growth moment. Sometimes we just look at this moment like a very sad moment. And I agree, it is. But also, it is an incredible moment to start to meditate what it means your spiritual life, what it means, what you're doing here, what is the purpose of life, and how you can use this to change your, like Dan said, your perspective, your point of view of life. The search that I made to understand that I need help was incredible conclusion, because when I started to have this, I learned right away that I cannot face these moments by myself. I really need people around, friends, family, loved ones, religion. I was so blessing to be the third generation of Spiritist family that made me feel so embracing that moment to understanding much more things, but also I realized in that moment how challenger is to people coping this with no vision of spiritual life. This make me this point in I decided after I did a therapy to study psychology because I really need to understand more how I will cope my pain, and also how can I help people cope their pain, because now in that moment I understood what it means that. And this was incredible for me because I had a big learning in this journal that I start to understand what it means to take care of my pain when I start to take care people's problems, not just coping their this moments, but also a lot of things in life. And this was a breaking moment in my life. I was very young. I was 24, very close to you. I was very young in that moment. And I start to understand that when you serve to people's pain and give a hand, a shoulder, a word, a silence, whatever, because sometimes we think that to help somebody we need to graduate or do something is very important. No, it's just be there next to. And I start to realize how I can how can use this to look my pain. And that was amazing because a lot of people ask me, but I work with people that has a lot of pain. Doesn't make me feel sad? No, make me feel that we are normal. We are together. Everybody's have such a kind of experience together. Learning the experience value of helping with grief, because was my history, I decided to found it with a friend, the Embrace Grief and Loss Project. You got this from your incredible bag that you have today. That explain a little bit what it means. And the Embrace Grief and Loss Project has the opportunity to help people that is having the experience with death, with the loved ones, and we start to share with them that the good news for us spiritists is that we are spirit, that death doesn't mean that we finish our lives. Like Luiz said, we are just sit down here and the other one is in the other part of our life, but it doesn't mean that because we don't have our body together, we don't still love. But more than that, we start to create the opportunity to show people that
after you have the experience of that, you can learn that love is much more than the body. And this, I can say, what have I learned during this journey? And first, I think the most important things that bring is the opportunity to learn that love goes beyond the physical body. We always say this, like for probably here, everybody read this, everybody learned this with Allan Kardec and Chico Xavier and so many incredible spirits that left us this opportunity to understand this. But when you put this in practice, when you are there, sometimes we see this, a lot of doubt comes in our mind. And we start to feel, oh, how can I feel this person if he's not here anymore? If I cannot see him? If I cannot use my 5 possibilities to touch and smell and all these things? And I think that for me and for a lot of people that we are embracing in the project, is a big opportunity to understand that the love is much more than the body. And in that moment, we start to learn how to create more sensibility, to start to feel the other person without our sense, and how to feel in our hearts, how to feel in our day. Every day, when you eat something that they love to eat, when you think about what they did and you laugh, and you start to understand that what it means love. And I think when you have the body together is amazing, because you can do a lot of, you can kiss, it's fun. But when they're not here using this body anymore, you can feel what really our hearts start to develop with that person. And I think for me, it's incredible opportunity to have this situation to teach us this. The experience brings us closer to the spiritual life and change our view of material life. Like Luiz said, we are so material, but when we have the experience, you need to start to think about this. For example, a lot of people that is part of the Embrace project, what did they do when they feel in the beginning? They feel that I have a big loss. How can I live like this? And the things that we start to show them that the life doesn't finish here. And we are having the opportunity to helping people that never never understand what it means spiritism. And we are share with them spiritism without to tell them that they have to be a spiritist to understand this, and just tell them that they can feel exactly this without any religion, without any practice, just start to develop this inside of them. The second thing that was very important learning for me, I realized that we don't lose anything. I understand that everybody say, I lost my children, lost my dog, I lost my mom, I understand that this is a habit that we do. But in fact, we don't lose anything. We don't lose nobody. If, like Luiz said, if they are there in the other part of the table, we just lose the visual contact for some of them, because a lot of people is still seeing them. But for some of us, we don't see. We have this difficult situation, but for how we can feel them. The third thing, pen is one awakening for the soul. We are have this opportunity with the pen to realize how can we challenge ourselves. And the pen doesn't come for teach us to suffer. The pen comes to teach us how we can cope the situation. And this makes us stronger. And also to finish, because my time is expired, I learned that we are still vulnerable beings. This is very important, because we think that we control everything. We control the situation. And sometimes we feel so frustrated in that moment when somebody is gone, because, oh my gosh, how I was supposed to be here. It's my kid. I have to help. I have to take care. We are vulnerable beings, and it's okay. Nothing is wrong with that. Doesn't mean that we don't have a courage, or no, just it's part of life, to accept what it comes to teach us, but also to understand that to be vulnerable that doesn't mean that is something wrong. It just, I think something is right, because nothing is wrong. Everything is right. And for final, I learned that we have only one religion, love, like say Danny. We need to share it with everyone. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Rosana. Very helpful, for sure. So, to wrap this up, we are going to invite Suzana to put this all together and talk to us about healing, hope, and consolation according to Spiritism.
So hello, everyone. So nice to be here today. Thank you all for your contribution. You moved me very deeply. So I want to talk a little bit about the role in Spiritism and how Spiritism can help us to cope with all the losses that we have undergone during the time of the pandemic. I think one of the biggest contributions that Spiritism brings is the validation of our feelings. In Heaven and Hell, we find a chapter called The Passage. I really like the title of this chapter, because when we are talking about death, we are talking about one aspect of the process of dying, which is the death of the material body. When we talk about loss, is also a relative word because, as it was mentioned here before, we don't really lose anything. So I think passage really speaks to more precisely and more truthfully to what we call death is. And Spiritism will empathize with our humanity and with the difficulties and with the loss, the feelings, the grief, the sadness, when in question 934 of the Spirit's book, the Spirits will tell Allan Kardec that for us, in our condition here in this world where we are everything is so dense and we are so deeply identified with the material reality, that death is either a trial or an expiation. Therefore, it is always, always challenging for us, and we should always be careful not to minimize the extent of the grief and of the sadness with our cognitive explanations. The spirits themselves are telling us that for our humanity in our stage of evolution, this is a trial or an expiation. And they will provide us as well with the elements and the understanding that will help us to better undergo the journey and the challenges such as the one that we have with the pandemic. So for instance, in question 919 of the Spirit's book, a question that's very well known by the Spiritist movement because it talks about self-knowledge, but not really addressed are the words of St. Augustine at the very end of this answer, when he will remind us that for the majority of us, the present is positive and the future is uncertain. And he will go on to say that what Spiritism does is to destroy this uncertainty about the future. It helps us to have absolutely no doubt that there is a future for all of us. And Spiritism did this initially by the presence of the phenomena that awaken our curiosity and our interest and our understanding there was something more than the physical life. And then with instructions that we have been called to disseminate. That is precisely what we are doing here today. And St. Augustine goes on to say that the creation of the certainty of the future is the reason why the Spirit's book was written in first place, to give us the certainty about our future lives. And with that permeating this idea, we have the tenet of Spiritism about immortality, and also the very important idea of divine justice that helps us to look at the world, to look at the challenges, to look at the losses, and understand that there is a God that is infinite love and infinite justice. The idea of the immortality, the idea of the future life helps us to live better the present moment. We understand, as was said here, that we are spirits. We understand, I wish your friend had known, that death is part of the natural laws, and it's going to knock on our door, no matter who you are, where you live, and what social class you belong to. It's just the natural part. And when we think the death of the physical body is part of the natural laws, we understand that we are here as travelers. We are always alive, sometimes inside the body, sometimes outside of the body. And under this perspective, the crib and the grave become simply transition points where we change our energetic reality without ever losing ourselves. So there is no loss. And with this perspective, our physical bodies that we identify so strongly, they become a garment that we are temporarily using. Or if you want to think of a traveler, it can be your spaceship. Also, it gives us a different perspective on our material life and what is our true possessions, our true belongings. And so we learn to understand, it helps us to become more skillful in navigating this world, learning to possess without being possessed. So material life, in one moment you may have, in the other moment you may not have, but you learn that when you go back to your real home, what you're going to take with us is nothing of this world. Spiritism finally brings us the idea that, a very interesting idea that's found in question 921, that again, along with the fact that we are travelers, what we are living here, and the words that they use is that we are here in this dreadful inn. So this is in question 921. We're in a dreadful inn. The conditions are not the best. We are in a third world. We are in a world of trials and expiations. We are still developing our awareness. Therefore, it's not a very nice neighborhood. But the Spirit tells that once we understand what is the purpose, the meaning of life, once we understand that we are travelers, we know that everything is temporary. And those challenges and those situations become little annoyances, because we understand that everything that's happening to us is helping us to go and to arrive to a better place. Last, but certainly not least, I would like to talk a little bit about the figure of our Master, Jesus, because Spiritism, as the consoler, comes to explain and to expand on the ideas that Jesus brought to us. And I kept thinking, how did he relate to us? And when we think about the ways that he related to us, he came to seek and to console, but also to instruct. He came to lift us, but also to enable us. So when he was ready to teach, there was a time where he was there to give his instructions, but he realized that the crowd was hungry. And he realized that before the instructions, it was important to provide the crowd with the nourishment that the physical body needed. And so he multiplied the bread, he multiplied the fish, he fed the body, and then the crowd was ready now to listen to the instructions and to learn. Spiritism does the same thing with us. Spiritism first heals the wounds of our grief by feeding our souls with hope. This is the greatest contribution that Spiritism brings to us. It brings the hope. It gets us off of the place of despair, because life now makes sense, because the future is not questionable anymore, but it's positive, because we are centered in the idea that we are immortal beings, and therefore our hunger for hope, for meaning, is fulfilled by this wonderful, wonderful philosophy. And once our heart calms down and we have harmony and we have peace, now we're able to listen to the instructions, to listen to the instructions that will remind us of who we are, of where we come from, or what we're here to do. And we move on despite of the struggles, because now life has a meaning and everything that we do has a purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzana. It was really a wonderful panel. And I would like to invite each one of you to give a brief final remark, if you have anything to add and anything to comment on any of the other panelists' comments. So I'll start with you, Luiz.
I would say death is not the only thing that takes loved ones away from us. Bia mentioned other things. I'm going to say there's one silent stealer of loved ones. It's called obsessors. They take loved ones away from us. And Spiritism explains clearly what this process is, what it means to the loved one, and what it means to those who love that loved one, people around that person. It teaches us that if we commit to live through charity, as Jesus said, you're going to take that loved one and make that the mission of your life. You're going to become a missionary until you take it back from the obsessor. Never let go. You're never going to let go. It's going to be the mission of your life. You renounce to everything else, but you're going to be there 100% of the times, in spirit or physically. It's a silent stealer, but we can stop it by being this missionary against them.
Thank you, Luiz. Bia?
I think it's working, yeah. I think I have been so fortunate in my life to have a lot of supportive adult mentors. I've had my parents, but relatives, guidance counselors, school principals. I've had so many supportive people, but the reality is that's not true for majority of youth. So I guess my final message would just be, if you know youth, reach out, right? Just talk. Again, part of it is just having a laugh with them, sharing a story with them, talking with them, and that'll help build that emotional regulation to help them cope with difficult situations. Thank you.
Thanks, Bia. Rosana?
I think it's okay. Yes, it's okay.
The Spiritists bring us the opportunity to look a little more inside. This is the invitation. And I think Cope, our pen, is to start to learn a little more about ourselves. And to learn about ourselves, we need to look in the other people's eyes. We need to be with each other. We need to understand that together is going to be much easier to face the challenge that life gives us. That's part of growth. And I think other thing is, don't look at the way life that means that we are happy or unhappy. I think we have to look life that learning is the path that I think we always need to be involved. I think spiritism is this path. Like Jussara said, Jesus gave us a shortcut, and we don't have to pick the shortcut. A lot of people can do whatever they want to do, but we can choose to pick the shortcut, and this is going to make our life much more enjoyable. And like Luiz said, charity means a behavior, is the way that you react in life. Charity is not just give something to someone. That's amazing also. But I think charity is to be you in that path. And I hope that everybody is believing this and going that way.
Thanks, Rosana. And Suzana?
I'm going to get back to your friend, that really stay with me. I have a question for the audience. How many of you have shared with your loved ones your wishes for when you're in the final moments of your life, or what you would like to be done once you were gone? Oh, that's a great number, more than I actually expected. So part of the problem is that even for us spiritists and spiritualists, talking about end of life and death is still complicated. So I challenge you to think why. Why? Because it's a natural law. Question 934 of the Spirit's book. Please read it. It says it's going to happen to all of us, in case you have not read it. But this is it. We need to talk more about it naturally, because it is part of living. And make this a ongoing conversation. The best way to spread the message is the way we live, right? So if we are uncomfortable with the idea of physical death, it's important. Perhaps one of the greatest ways to be more comfortable is to talk about it, and is to look inside and see, why is it? Why am I having such a difficult time addressing? Because you may say, well, I'm still very young. I am still very young. But you never know. You never know when it's going to happen. So thinking about these topics, about all kinds of losses, talking about it, and working within ourselves so that we manifest the naturality and our ideas in our daily lives, wherever you are, I think is a very powerful way of teaching the world through ourselves how to better cope with loss, and letting spiritism shine in our actions and in our way of living.
Thank you, Suzana. Thank you all. And thank you all for listening to us and sharing with us these moments. Thank you.
Well, thank you all the panelists, Luiz, Bia, Suzana, Rosana, Joao, thank you for moderating. And this was very interesting discussion, if you agree. I don't know, are you enjoying the morning session? You are, right? But you look a little hungry. But before you get ready for lunch, let's ask the parents who have kids or teens in the youth classrooms to leave the kids now to have lunch with you. You don't want them to starve. Remember that you need to check them back into the classrooms before you come back to the continuation of our talk in this auditorium. Rosangela, where the lunch is going to be?
Well, lunch will be served at the Commons, the big room by the check-in area. And note that there are 2 entrances to the Commons for the lunch buffet. There will be volunteers directing you as you go outside. During the lunch break, you will have plenty of time to enjoy your lunch, purchase some great Spiritist books in the auditorium lobby right here outside, schedule your fraternal conversation if you wish, and mingle with friends. Please reserve enough time to do everything and plan to come back here, slow down, calm down, because we're going to start back sharply at 2 o'clock, okay? And have a great lunch.